Wow, what a pleasure today to be talking to one of my best friends, somebody I've known for at least 25 years, Nord Brue. And Nord's been a very important mentor for me. I'll tell you about that a little bit. He's a farmer. Well, he was a farmer. He grew up as a farmer, a lawyer, a founder, an investor, and now he's a vintner. He's back on the farm, except it's a winery in Sonoma instead of a pig farm in Iowa. I don't know if that's a rise or a fall from grace. We'll find out about that later. He's a son, a brother, an oldest brother, a dad, a husband. He founded, let me continue with the bio here a little bit. I'm going to share my screen, show you some pictures. So you see here, he founded Bruegger's Bagels. Many of you heard about Bruegger's or enjoyed Bruegger's. Bruegger's did a good job of bringing really high quality New York style bagels to places they had never been to before, part of the American foodie revolution. Really high quality quick service bagel restaurants that sprung up all over the country. Nord founded that. You can see his name in the company title. But here's Nord, the oldest, with some of his siblings in Iowa back in the day. It's not a picture of the farm he grew up on, but it's farms in Iowa. That's the world Nord came from. Another family picture. And here's a picture of the one of the Brugger stores. So that was a great run. So he founded it, grew it with a great team, ran it, CEO, sold it. I had another business too after that. Now this investor phase. So here's one of the investments he's excited about. He's investing in a bunch of startup businesses. This one's called Chipper, Cross-Border Payments for Africa. Chipper's raised $100 million in its latest series. Nord got in really early. He was on the board of Grinnell College, and this founder of Chipper, whose last name, Nord, can you say his last name?
Saranjoji.
Saranjoji is the founder. He was a student at Grinnell when Nord met him. Nord smelled talent. Saranjoji smelled mentoring. And so Nord got in real early on this amazing Chipper story. Chipper is a 3-year-old startup that now joins an elite group amongst African startups. It's only the 6th to achieve unicorn status. And it has had funding from Bezos Expeditions and the Silicon Valley Bank, which those of you who know investment banking, Silicon Valley Bank is a big player. So Nord just keeps on learning and getting involved in interesting things. And I don't think it's ever going to stop. Welcome, Nord Brue.
Thank you, Eric. A pleasure to be here.
This is going to be fun, Nord.
Can I ask a question?
Okay.
I would like a show of hands. If we were in person, I would say I want a show of hands.
Yeah.
Who signed up? Who registered for this program because of the title, and who registered in spite of the title? That would be interesting to know.
Okay, hands for because of the title.
Well, I can't see, but you probably.
That's pretty good. It's I see about 5 hands total. That's not bad for a title.
Okay, in spite of the title? Well, anyway.
And not bad for a title. Now, how about in spite of the title? Mike Decker, but don't worry, he's just a pain. You don't really want to pay any attention to that data. That's garbage in, garbage out. So, Nord, I got to just say a little more. So you really have been a major mentor in my life. You continue to be. I think we've developed a co-mentoring partnership. But I was just saying to somebody, when I first met Nord, I was really in the clinical psychology space, hadn't even thought about being in the business space. And you hired me to teach a class on Bowen theory at Bruegger's Bagels, which there were 5 meetings. The first meeting, 15 people came. The second meeting, 4 people came. The third meeting, 2 people came. I was still using a teaching style that worked really well for clinical situations, not working for business people. Nord didn't mind. He liked the presentations And Nord, thank you for doing that. I think just being around you and your warmth and your listening to me and your faith in me helped me feel, you know what, I could play in the space with CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs. Nord already had a lot of status in my community in Northern Vermont here at that time. Bruegger's was very well known. It was a company that was employing a lot of people. And so, you know, that was just good for me, Nord. And I think you've done that for a lot of people.
Eric, I love things that grow. And you
Okay.
and I love people that grow, businesses that grow. I even love grapes that grow. If it's growing, I like it. You know, we're making progress, making our way through life, and your growth has been phenomenal.
Thanks.
Truly phenomenal.
So I think the quote is great. Drucker deserves all kinds of credit because people are quoting it like crazy. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Peter Drucker, you all know him, probably the most famous management guru in the world, except for maybe Machiavelli. So Nord, tell me about culture. What do you observe?
Yeah, Eric, first of all, let me say that the origin of this quote is apocryphal. It's probably Peter Drucker. Everybody attributes it to Peter Drucker, but it's not clear that he really said it. There was a former CEO of Ford Motor Company that popularized it in the last 15 years.
Right.
But it should have been. So here's the first illustration. I would say this quote had the good sense to get good parents. It got Peter Drucker as a parent. So the best thing you can do for yourself in your career is choose your parents carefully. And this quote got a very good parent in Peter Drucker. And
it's course, like it's kind of more important who you work for than what they're doing, sort of.
Yeah, well, because a strategy will evolve and a strategy will develop. Yeah. But if the culture is not there, it doesn't matter how great the strategy is. The strategy will go nowhere if the culture is not sound. If there's not a set of organizational beliefs and practices and commitment and shared passion, it's going nowhere. But when you've got that, well, then the strategy will evolve. It's a commonplace now. Everybody says the only internet company that didn't do a pivot, by a pivot, I mean didn't completely change its direction, may have been PayPal. Everybody else got into it and they discovered, well, we're not quite on target. We're not exactly hitting that spot. And so they changed. I mean, we had one company that changed. Our original goal was to make trusts, family trusts, available to everybody. Turned out there wasn't much of a market for it at that time. So now we're doing a relationship that helps people become part who hold crypto coins, Bitcoin, other cryptocurrencies, to become connected with the rest of the financial world. But things change and you got to be responsive. So culture can help you change, but if you don't got culture, strategy won't save you.
Nord, I loved how delighted you are about Chipper.
Well,
it's so fun to hear about your excitement about this young man and what they're doing to bring secure, trustable fintech to Africa. Well, I think that's pretty cool because I can't wait till we can all say, wow, Africa is really out of the third world.
Well, this is part of them making progress that direction, because anything that reduces friction, and by friction, I mean the cost of doing business, the cost of living, the cost of changing money. And we all forget how much the internet has changed our lives. So Ham Saranjoji had this vision, this great plan. And I wanted to invest even if I thought it was very, very risky. And an internet investment in Africa is not a low risk environment. And I knew that even if it didn't succeed, it would lay the groundwork for other people to get it right the next time around. If it did succeed, Ham would become a very, 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 very wealthy young man. And it has, and he is. And that's so great. That's exciting to me. That's a lot of fun.
So, you know, you said, back to the thing you said, like pick your parents. And I think that's amazing advice for my daughters is it's who you work for. Who you work for in your 20s, really, really important choices. And you might think, I have no interest in that business, but I like that person. So what about, are you tracking that with these investments you're making? Are you paying attention to the person, the founder, and the kind of cultures they build? And what are you learning about that?
Eric, let me take a step back and talk about this phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Breakfast.
Breakfast or lunch.
Some people say it like a Marine.
Breakfast and lunch and everything else. But so Drucker was the go-to guy. He created Japan Inc. Really, he was much more famous in Japan than the U.S. And his whole approach to management made what they used to call Japan Inc. fabulous. But then along in my generation, it was all about Jim Collins. And Collins talked about level 5 leadership. Same stuff, old wine in new bottles. And today I understand from my son, Eric, and I learned from him that it's all about Lencioni, the advantage. So, and Lencioni's thing, they say, organizational health trumps everything else. So it's the same kind of thing that we see percolating along. So yeah, I think you've got to really observe that. So one of the things that's been fun for me in thinking about what I might say that would be interesting or useful for your audience is a survey, a thumbnail, because with a little bit of time and a little bit of distance, your way of thinking about stuff changes. So I had a 42-year association with Green Mountain Power Corporation, the electric public utility that serves Vermont. And so I had a ringside seat observing the behavior of 5 very different CEOs, very different leadership styles, very different management approaches. And I thought it might be interesting, and I'd love your reaction after, if I do that. I would say these people, the first I had involvement with was conflictual. The second was managerial. The third was visionary. The fourth was situational. And the fifth, a recent guest on your program, was transformational. Now, if you're interested in that, I can give you a thumbnail of what this looks like. But I think I feel like there's enough history in that. The rest of them I'm living with.
Can we start with the top? What's transformational? What does it look like? How does it act? Does Sarah and Joji have it?
So far, so good. But you know, as Zhou Enlai said when he was asked about the French Revolution, Zhou Enlai in China said, "Well, it's too soon to say." And so I prefer
whether the French Revolution was a success. Zhou Enlai says in the 20th century, too soon to say. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Too soon to say. So I'm going way out on a limb and talking about stuff that's within the last 40 years, but at least, you know, I don't want to, Ham is fantastic. He's a great leader. He is born to have significance. You know, when I was talking with Ham,
that's a very interesting phrase. Born to have significance.
He wears it lightly. So some people feel horribly burdened by the pressures of leadership, and they feel weighed down. And Ham bears that burden lightly. So I'm interested in how that happens. And so I found out from Ham. Ham comes up he drives from San Francisco up to have breakfast with me.
Up to the winery.
Up to the winery. Well, and I make a good breakfast, but it's not worth an hour and 20 minutes driving. So
is that Ham calling now?
No. I forgot to.
So he comes up. Yeah, he comes up. He wants to talk to you.
Yeah. So we talk, and I find out that Ham's grandparents went to Oxford University. Yeah. They were Ugandans. They went to Oxford. I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. This is pretty interesting to me. Who, you know, coming out of Uganda goes to Oxford University at the age of when his grandparents were young. So he didn't say any more than that. And as it went on, I finally learned, more recently, I learned that his grandparents were at Oxford because his grandfather was slated to become the king of Uganda.
Yeah.
And of course, Idi Amin Dada came in, and so
Painful.
they had to go into exile instead of stepping up to the crown. But so,
But Nord, am I following you that you kind of noticed something a bit regal about this guy, and you'd known him for quite a few years, and then you get this detail and you say, that makes sense to me.
yeah, exactly.
And can you say a little bit more about this wearing it lightly? It's a very interesting phrase, and I think what we're thinking about now is leaders and people who lead cultures, who lead exceptional cultures. Can you say a little more about this? It's a very interesting descriptor.
Well,
Wears it lightly.
I've observed there are certain things that I love and that I do relatively easily. And board service or being an advisor, if you're talking about archetypes, you talk about Merlin. I like the Merlin archetype better than the King archetype. I don't like having day-to-day responsibility running a company. That's not my gig.
Yeah.
So for me, that was a burden. When I had 5,500 employees and I was responsible for performing the CEO role, it's hard work. It's a slog. And I saw other people who just, it was like mother's milk to them. You know,
They wore it lightly.
They wore it lightly. And so I like being a board member. I like being an advisor. I like my spot now a lot better than I liked it when I had to run something every day.
So Merlin Brue, use the word light a lot. So I think you're maybe talking about a joyfulness and ease that you notice in this guy. It's just kind of fun. Is he enjoying the ride?
Yes, the ease can lead to joyfulness because you're not feeling stressed. But when you feel the burden, you're operating out of your preference zone.
I think there's a connection there to creativity. So would you say more about transformational leader?
Well, so for example, Mary Powell was part of the management team at Green Mountain Power before she became CEO. So her predecessor, Chris Dutton, is a great, he was Cool Hand Luke.
He's a guy you love.
Well, he's a great guy, and he was perfect for the company at the time. And he's a perfect expression of that old aphorism. It's hard to remember that it was your intention to drain the swamp when you're up to your backside in alligators. And we were up to our backside in alligators. We were, because the Public Service Board had changed, in our view, had changed the rules, we were threatened with bankruptcy. It was a dire time. And Chris, Cool Hand Luke, managed the situation. Now, if he had tried to manage it like the first GMP president that I worked with, it would have been a disaster. But Chris stayed calm, cool, and collected. As Mary Powell once said, I had to check to see if Chris had a pulse. You know, if he would. So he was doing a great job, and the board sent me, I was chairman of the board. So the board said, we want to find out to make sure that Chris is going to stay around. Will you go make sure? So I got Chris and we talked. And I said, Chris, what would cause you to leave the company? And he said, I would leave if I got bored. Okay. All right. That's amazing. So anyway, we get through that very, very difficult time. Chris had a team, his senior team included Mary Powell and Steve.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Anyway,
this is Green Mountain Power. So a lot of our audience is not Vermont, but this is the largest power company in Vermont. And he's about to talk about Mary Powell, who is a person who has done a lot, who's now the CEO of Sunrun, this first or second largest solar company in the nation, based in San Francisco. And Nord had a lot of connection with Mary Powell, who you're rating as a transformational leader.
Well, what Mary Powell was able to do, because remember now the plane is flying level, the plane is stable, and so she was able to take what is traditionally thought electric utilities are not very exciting. Mary Powell made it exciting because she started doing a variety of things that would replace the old way of doing it,
Yeah.
that would move into a different kind of energy future that was much less
Boring.
much less boring. Yeah. And I'm a
I
growth.
think you told me that one of the things you noticed about her is that the talent all around our region paid attention, they noticed her. They
Well,
noticed what she was doing, partly because she was doing such an interesting job of what you just described, and they wanted to come work there. So she was a talent magnet, which I think is one of the features of the amazing cultures I get to watch, Nord. I find this absolutely fascinating. In fact, I was talking to somebody about it, and he goes, you know what? That even happens within our company. There's a team in our company that people from other teams want to be on.
It was absolutely amazing. It was staggering to me to see everybody wanting to work for the electric public utility.
Wow.
When I started at Green
What a
Mountain,
force.
I started at Green Mountain in 1975. We were public enemy. We were the enemy. And I said, you know, the culture at Green Mountain, down on the ground, the culture was always public service. People keep the power flowing. You know, we like it when we flick the switch and the light goes on and the heat is in our house and so forth. And now Mary was able to start changing the whole nature of the business and doing great stuff. Anyway.
Well, really rebranding it as a green leader. And of course, you know, Nord, people are emotional about power.
Yeah.
You know,
yes.
so that in what people feel about power is often mixed with all kinds of ambivalence, and there's a lot of hostility towards power and powerful people, and there's also a lot of admiration, a lot of lionizing of powerful people and power. So yeah, that's interesting. But Mary was, I remember you told me that she was like a talent magnet.
Well, Eric, so the question for you, so I've described the situation that Chris Dutton found himself in, and then it opened up for Mary's taking it to the next level. In your experience with these companies you consult with, do people make the time, or does the time make the leader? I mean, are they responding to the situation and doing what they need to do based on external circumstances, based on what they've been handed, or do they shape it? And in my view, it's probably both, but I'm interested in how you think about that issue.
Well, I would say to have a masterful balance of those two things, where you know when not to try to make the time, because you need to flow with what's happening. You need to be receptive and deal with the cards that you got dealt. And then to know the other time when this is my moment, this is the moment where I need to come in and insert a vision or champion a vision, shake things up. To have the balance would be one of the features of an amazing leader, I think. And you know, I have a specific narrow focus amongst the broader topic of leadership, which is how people build teams and how they lead people. And I think among the vast amount of things I don't know much about, I've had the good fortune to watch that quite a bit now. And I have a predilection towards being completely fascinated by it, and a body of knowledge that's very useful, Bowen leadership theory, that's very useful in thinking about it. So I feel like I have a sense, I have a nice little collection now of people who are absolutely astonishingly good at building amazing teams. Mary Powell's certainly one of them, but there's a whole collection of them. And it's just fascinating to watch how they do it, how they build partnerships with the people they work for. People love to be challenged. They also really like to be loved, you know, and that's a mix. To do both of those things really well, you know, the best ones do them both. And they could do they could do both of them in a 5-minute interaction.
Well, to me, the most important and exciting part of it, and why I like being in the private economy rather than, you know, Milton Friedman talked about the two different ways of thinking about stuff. There's the political machine and there's the market machine. And everything in the market machine is consensual. I mean, people don't have to go to work for any of these companies. They don't have to stay at any of these companies. They get to choose. So everybody's there voluntarily. And
yeah, there's a dynamism in that. Let's these folks, some of them signed up for this culture thing. I want to make sure we give them something there, more, a little more there before we go to maybe a breakout. It's about 10 minutes from now. Can you talk about amazing cultures that you've seen? What are they like?
Well, you see it everywhere. I remember when I was in the Air Force, every person who was a pilot adopted a West Virginia drawl. Why, you ask? Because the greatest test pilot in the history of the US was a guy named Chuck Yeager, who was born and raised in West Virginia, and he had a West Virginia drawl. And so you couldn't even tell who you were talking to because they all made themselves sound like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we had a very recent experience. We had one of the very early employees at Google spend last weekend with us. And this is a person who was a senior legal person at Google, and then since that time has become a preeminent venture investor. And so the talk was about, well, this one was like, that was a Googler, that was a googly, you know. So we talked about other people, and one of Suzanne's relatives who was an early Google person and now doing Google-like stuff. So people recognize a pattern of behavior, a culture, the things that they had in common. And I don't know, does that go where you were thinking, or you were?
Well, yes, but yes. What is this? You know, what does it look like? What is Google, we're presuming, had something amazing, you know, and you've been a part of very successful things. What do these most amazing cultures look like? What do they feel like? How do they act? One thing Drucker said was, I love this, to grow faster, put your best people on your best opportunities. And he was big into opportunities, not problems. Focus on the opportunities, not the problems. In other words, make sure you have the best people doing the right things. This is something I notice varies greatly among the people I work with, and the companies I work with, that some of them are more nimble. And I think it's a lot of it has to do with nimbleness, that they see this is a very, very dynamic leader. And we're going to shake things up. We're going to move them up quicker, and we're going to give them this opportunity faster. And kind of, you know, maybe shake up some seniority sensitivities, maybe shake up some plans that we had, and that thing of aligning talent to opportunities. And then the people who build these teams, they do the same thing within their teams. So that, I think, would be one characteristic to me of an amazing culture. And what I want to ask you is, what do you think are the other characteristics? What have you seen? What's a notable characteristic?
I think there are different styles there, very different styles. So for example, I would say Steve Jobs created a certain kind of culture at Apple. Now, Steve Jobs, by all accounts, his biographers and firsthand accounts of people I know who worked there, he was not exactly a pleasant human being. But it was a mission-driven company, and he did interesting stuff. There's a quote from Colin Powell in today's Wall Street Journal about how he really, he said some people follow a leader because even if they don't like him, they're curious to find out what's coming next. And so
he was probably fascinating, Jobs, and they were fascinated in what they were doing. And many of the people on the teams that really made Apple what it is say it was the best gig they ever had, even though he was hard to deal with because it was so exciting.
Well, and so for me, it's all been about mission driven. You know, there's a different mission for every company, every enterprise, and figuring out what the mission is that everybody will get excited by, whether it's creating the perfect computer or cell phone or whether it's in our dairy company, getting the farmer's milk to market was exciting. It gave meaning to people's life. When I spent a year in the management school at Oxford University as a visiting academic. It was great, good fun. And so I had to write a piece as a visiting fellow. We expected to turn out scholarship. So I wrote a piece on recruiting and retention and retailing and studied, there were many, many companies at that time, they were worried about running out of employees. It's very like 1988 and 89 again, when people can't find employees. So we reviewed all these studies, and what we found was the most important factor in making people excited and to stay with their company was not pay, not even close. Pay was number 4. You know what the most important thing was?
I think you're going to tell me right now.
I was hoping you would ask. Eric, I was waiting.
I think you're going to say mission.
I know. Well, it's kind of like mission, but it's not exactly. Well, maybe it is. What fired people up and kept them working was meaningful work, finding meaning in their work.
Yeah.
And I think we get, some of us who have been very privileged to have fun and exciting and rewarding jobs think that we have a different set of values and interests from the entry level of, the starting level people. But these studies were done with minimum wage workers in quick service restaurants. They want meaning in their work. So, we changed at Bruegger's. We started to recognize the special talents it required to make a bagel, because it's a living thing with the yeast growing inside it. So
it is. A good bagel is absolutely a living thing.
It's a living work.
My sister lives in Brooklyn, okay?
Well, she has her biases, we had our biases. But so I will take, so we would tell people, we tell all of our employees, any fool can fry dead cow on hot steel, but it takes somebody with judgment and perception and to be an artist to get the yeast working just to the right degree and not kill the yeast by overcooking it or overboiling it.
Right.
Get it in the, but this required, there was meaning in their work. And we provided a place that dads could take their kids without feeling guilty about giving them big burgers and fries when they had them that weekend. And, so we created meaning or helped them discover.
I get that. I mean, food is very meaningful. And that's an interesting way that you help the employees understand how important it is and that they were contributing to that.
In our particular time.
I think this is an amazing point about meaning. And I want to say a couple things about it. One is I'm fascinated by high stakes relationship challenges. They're all over every single business I work in. And one of the things I think when we're coaching well, we help them make meaning of the high stakes relationship challenge. And then it becomes less stressful and more interesting. And the creativity wakes up. But it touches so deeply that humans have a tremendous need for meaning. Like if you don't have enough food, you don't care about meaning. If you're actually in a famine situation, which thank God in the 20th century has almost completely disappeared from the earth. In the 21st century, it's even less than it was in the 1800s when there was quite a bit of it all over the planet. So I think we're a more creative world because of that. And making meaning is now, right? Like, so Starbucks, they became more meaningful because of some of the things they do to, brand themselves as making an impact. You mentioned Green Mountain Power doing it. So that's fascinating as maybe as a feature of amazing cultures, is that they do a great job of making what they do meaningful, even if it's something kind of mundane like power. That's absolutely fascinating. I think great team leaders, or even director or managers, great managers do this. For some reason, they create the feeling what we're doing is meaningful. And I think sometimes it's just, we're doing this together and we rely on each other and we really want to help each other. And that's very meaningful.
Well, it is. If I can make a reference back to your recent conversation with Mary Powell, she said when she sits across the table from someone, she's always framing in her own mind, not saying it out loud, but framing in her own mind, I love you, I love you, I love you. And so
Goosebumps. That
well,
was
that's-
amazing to hear her say.
that's Mary's powerful approach. And my own is, I sit there trying to imagine win-win. How can this
Yeah.
interaction result in a win-win environment? That involves respecting the other person's point of view, where they're coming from, and hopefully some time spent sipping tea before you ever get to the table when you're trying to see if
It's
there's
probably a feature of likable, which many business leaders are advantaged if they are likable because of these factors we're talking about. To be thinking like that, to be wearing that deep in your heart and soul, like you are with the win-win. And by the way, I got to mention this. So the Mary Powell interview was one of the wonderful ones I've done. I've done other really wonderful ones that touch on this topic of love, executive love. Elizabeth Azari, who's on this call, I have an interview with her that touches on that. Mary McClure is another one. And these are all on the LeaderSight YouTube channel, which this one will be on also. So feel free to watch, feel free to share. I think that we should give these bright people a chance to talk to each other. They probably are smarter than we are, Nord. And they would probably like to try to articulate their thoughts on this topic, and they might get a lot of value out of that. So I'm going to use the breakout function to set up that opportunity for you folks. And it's going to last about 7 minutes. It's going to be brief. And after it happens, you can come back and talk.
Give me a second. I got to participate.
Somebody needs to get muted. Hello. Thank you. I just want to show you something real quick. I have a course. I think the stuff we're talking about can be taught, can be developed, can be learned. One of the features of great cultures is they develop great leaders. And I help people do that through things like this course, Leading by Managing Self, that I teach. This just shows you the YouTube that we have, the YouTube. Let's see. Oh, this is coming up. So Ben Pearson, who I had on the show last winter, is an inspiring person. Nord, this guy is really something. You and Ben would have great talks. He's a startup guy, him and his dad in a garage. Now they have 40 people in a joint venture in India with 200 people, and it's going to get bigger. And I was just talking to Ben this week about his family ER leadership journey. His daughter broke her arm, and he has an amazing story about what happened in the ER with he and his daughter. And we're going to be talking about that on November 10th. I hope you can join us. It's really a great story, and Ben has a lot to say. So and now I'm going to use the breakout function and give you folks the opportunity to talk in groups of 3 for about, like I said, about 7 minutes. It'll be pretty brief. So enjoy, and then 7 minutes from now, you'll automatically come back here and we will have a chance to take some questions or hear some of your comments for Nord Brue. All right, here we go. Hey, welcome back. Nord, you told some great stories there. I want to open the floor up here. Would anybody like to make a comment or ask Nord a question? And if you want to go first, just unmute yourself and start talking. You don't have to raise your hand. What are you thinking about? What do you think about culture? What's an amazing culture?
While we're waiting, one of the things that occurred to me during our breakout session was just a reminder that leadership is a function, not a position. And everyone in every organization can exert leadership within their piece of the domain.
Here.
And so I think that's important for us not to lose track of.
Agreed. And if you have the advantage of knowing about Bowen, you know it in your blood that anybody can change a system by the way they act. And I think it's worth repeating. Thank you for doing it. That leadership is not defined in this space here as your position within the hierarchy. It's defined by how you behave. And a leader is somebody who helps the group meet its adaptive challenges. Thank you, Ron Heifetz, for that line. So anybody want to jump in on this? Culture, Thomasina Williams, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Eric. And thank you, Nord, for sharing. I'm curious, you talked about how while you have been a CEO, you prefer your current role as a board member and an advisor. I'm curious what you think about the board's role in setting the tone of culture within a company.
The board, of course, is the entity that chooses the leader. Officially, if maybe not unofficially, maybe there's an internal process and maybe the leader is more or less preordained, but the board legally and finally has the authority and the responsibility to elect the leader and to work with that leader, not directly with the team, but with the leader to challenge it. So it's an indirect thing, but a board member, and I find that I do a different kind of leader of participation on a board, depending on whether I'm in the leadership of the board or the backbencher. If I'm the backbencher, I'm the dissenter. I'm the questioner. I would say, why are we doing this? Why, I'm a contrarian. And then if I'm in a leadership position on a board, then I'm an interpreter. Then I'm working with the board chair to help the rest of the board come to share the CEO's perspective. Sometimes it works. Sometimes the board says, no, that's not what we're trying to do here. So it's indirect, but I think it's very important. They choose the leader and they work with the leader. They listen to the leaders or the CEO's proposals for action. They approve the budgets, and the money follows the money ultimately.
And Nord, maybe they pay attention, an excellent board would pay attention to the culture and help the CEO or the people who run the business to do the same, to pay attention to the culture, to think about masterful cultural leadership, not to intervene themselves on it.
Yeah, Eric, I think that's spot on. I didn't mean to say, I make it always a practice to talk to people in the organization. How's it going? What are you thinking? Are we on the right track? But I don't engage them in a supervisory role.
Rhonda Van Dyke, what's your question?
So in an organization where a healthy, vital culture has been established, and the leader leaves, retires, moves on, what helps healthy culture remain after its initiator or leader is gone?
Ooh, can I say something about this? Nord.
I wish you would. Yeah,
I'll tell you, Nord. I am amazed at the power of developing teams that can take over. It's incredibly efficient and it prevents so much risk. Interviewing stinks. It's like, you can make great hires from outside and there are times to do it, but I'm amazed at the difference in the fecundity of the cultures I work in for developing the next leaders in whatever roles. And that's one thing that I think about that, Rhonda. What do you think, Nord?
Well, Jim Collins, you're exactly right, Eric. Jim Collins is absolutely unequivocal about it. Great organizations, great companies develop leaders within. So they understand the culture. They're not they may grow it, they may evolve it, they may transform it, but they don't come in like a cold bath. And so I think a good organization will develop its leaders. One of the things that Green Mountain Power, and I was chair of the board, we had a long runway for Mary. It's kind of risky, it's kind of challenging because you put a target on somebody's back when you identify them as the next CEO. But we did that and it worked out. In that case, it worked out perfectly.
That's very interesting. I'm involved in some long runway situations, and the person who with the target, as you put, or the star on their back is kind of going, well, wait, I'm not, but other people keep bringing it up because it happens that they sense that person has the characteristics, if not the SME. They don't have the subject matter expertise yet. They have the characteristics, which matters more. So that's very interesting, the long ramp.
If you have to go outside, take your time. Take your time.
Long interview.
I was
sipping tea. Talk to the people that know them.
I spent months and months and months hiring the CEO who was going to lead our dairy company. He thought it was, he didn't understand why it was going on so long. It was a month of interviews. And
this was Franklin Foods, not the farm he grew up on. Go ahead, Nord.
That's right. No, Franklin Foods, exactly. And but it resulted in a 20-year wonderful relationship and great building of a great enterprise. So take your time. If you haven't already developed somebody internally, which is the best choice, take your time. Get to know them. Let them get to know you.
There's an employment law that I would love to have loosened up or maybe even go away. And that's the one where you're not allowed to talk to people about their families in the interview process.
Well, now, Andrea,
you mentioned
Andrea Shar is twisting in her chair.
I'll get her in a sec, but I got to say this. Sarah, you mentioned Sarah and Joji and the regal background that confirmed for you the vibe. It's not so much that you want to check out whether they have high pedigree. It's how they talk about the family. Some of the most amazing people leaders I've met come from very difficult backgrounds, but the way they talk about the background is strikingly leaderly. Andrea Shara, what are you thinking about? You got to unmute.
Yeah,
well, I will.
I'm glad to be here and really love Nord and all that you stand for. And even though you don't talk about differentiation of self, kind of you present, that way. And when I'm listening to it, what you had to say, I was just thinking about this, holding people responsible. How do you hold people responsible and then they can react to you? And I was just thinking about that. Besides, there's all the good part, which is fabulous, and then there's the really difficult parts of.
Yeah,
Andrea, what I thought you were going to tell us, and I'll just what you shared with me. We can talk about their family of origin. We can ask them what were the lessons they learned from their family of origin. We may not be able to talk to them about their current marital status or anything else, but we can talk about prior generations. Anyway.
That's good to know, because I think people are often really afraid to do that. I didn't know that. So Andrea, I'm noting the time. So we've got 3 minutes left, but I just want to mention this, that Andrea raises a good point here. One of the features of a great culture is that they deal with irresponsible behavior that's happening inside my house. And a lot of times it's not unethical, illegal, etc. It's just not performing at an excellent level. And I know Andrea comes from a family that produces excellence. It's an absolutely amazing thing to be around, listening to her talk about how they do it. But maybe Nord, can you say what have you learned about this? Cultures that hold people accountable for responsible behavior.
That's one of the great challenges. Every time I've had to end a business relationship with someone, I always wonder later why I took so long to get it done. And I don't think that that's unlike a lot of people. It's a challenge. It's difficult, but
I think Bowen called that the togetherness force.
Yeah,
which is there for a reason and is not a bad thing.
Exactly. So you said earlier in this discussion, Eric, it's finding a balance. It's finding a balance between, or the man who could negotiate everything always ended his comments, and it was great. He said, you'd say to the other party, I want to do this. I care, but not that much. I care, but not that much. And being
I think you've represented that as a good position to operate from in negotiation, but also team leadership, that you care deeply, but not that much. There's a limit to that.
Yeah.
By the way, I have a shtick on firing good guys. It's harder to fire a good guy or a good gal or a good anybody. It's harder for people to fire them when they're nice, It's interesting. So we're wrapping up here, Nord. I want to thank you again for coming on. This was great. Very dynamic. We sort of laid out a bunch of things that each one of them deserves an hour, but I just enjoyed it tremendously.
Eric, it was my pleasure. My pleasure. I hope it was useful.
Is that a rainbow behind you on in the vineyard in Sonoma?
Absolutely. This actually, I stole this picture from Eric. It was given to me by my son, who took the picture right outside our house. And so, yeah, and you know what is at the end of every rainbow?
I think so.
I'm going to go look.
Well, you have 10 companies that there may be some end of rainbow action going on in these companies you're investing in, Nord. So interesting to watch you reinvent yourself again. So Nord, I'm going to have to get you back on here soon. But please, folks, I'd love to have you join us for the next one. This Ben Pearson's an interesting young man, and he's a great father, very, very thoughtful father, very thoughtful culture builder. And this story, we're not going to spend the whole time telling this amazing story of daughter's broken arm in the ER. It's a sensitive kid, and his management of that is the real story. And we'll probably branch off from there into culture development, business leadership, managing crises in the company. So see you then. Bye-bye.